Good evening, good morning, based on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the webinar series of ReachIvy, where we speak with senior admissions officers from around the globe, from top schools, and try to understand the programs, the admissions, and stuff like that. Today with us, we have Kristen, who's joining us all the way from Boston, Medford in Massachusetts, who is the Senior Associate Director of the Master of International Business Program at the Fletcher School, Tufts University. Again, it's a pleasure having you, Kristen, and I'm super excited because I went to school just down in Cambridge, and I was really impressed by how the Tufts campus is and how the programs are. So welcome. I'll just introduce you briefly, and then we'll get started with the questions. So Kristen, as I said earlier, she handles the Master of International Business Program. It comprises of student counseling, program evaluation, and admissions, of course. As the oldest graduate school of international affairs in the United States, Fletcher attracts diverse and accomplished students to its graduate programs. Before joining Fletcher, Kristen has worked in consulting, but she's been in higher ed for the last 15 years. So I'm sure she'll share with us her insights and kind of help our students to get to know more about the university and the program. So yeah, I guess we can get started. Just as also pointed to the viewers, you can leave your questions at the comment area in the live YouTube stream, and then we'll do our best to take the questions as and when appropriate. So yeah, Kristen, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you.
All right. So I guess let's start with the the most interesting aspect, which is just the university itself. Like, what would you say this university is about? What's the location? What's the feel like? Yeah.
So that's a great question, and I think it's Fletcher and Tufts University in general. Just to give you a picture and a mental image of who we are, is the kind of campus that you might see in a movie. If you imagine what an American university campus looks like, it's something like we have here at Tufts. And in fact, it's been featured in many movies. So it's really got that kind of classic American university feel to it. But the nice part is we are so close to downtown Boston as well. And so I think our students feel like there's a really nice balance between this gorgeous kind of leafy campus and then just a short subway ride right to downtown Boston and all these professional opportunities that we have to offer. And Fletcher, the graduate school that we're here to talk about today, is actually the oldest graduate school of international affairs in the United States, as was mentioned before. And so we've got a long history, nearing on 100 years now, of offering graduate education to our students.
That sounds great. And of course, Fletcher is known all around the world for this, and especially programs that are offered in multiple disciplines. But the particular program that I guess our viewers are most interested in right now is the Master of International Business Program, which, according to my knowledge, is a pretty innovative sort of program. If you would want to sort of talk a little about this particular program.
Sure. Yes, the Master of International Business is really a one of its kind. There's nothing out there quite like it. The closest approximation would be people that choose to do dual degrees between a policy degree and an MBA. That takes a lot longer, and it's two separate cohorts. The MIB degree is a hybrid degree that about half the coursework is what you would find in a more traditional MBA program, but very internationally focused. And the other half is taking class in diplomacy, in law, in international economics, and culture and social issues, and political issues. The idea being is we're trying to help students understand not only how businesses operate, but the international contextual factors that impact them. And we call this contextual intelligence. And really, it's not something that you would get from any other business school. It's really quite a unique offering that we have.
That sounds great. So you just highlighted what the strengths of the program are. But if you had to put some light on the curriculum, so how does the curriculum look like? Is it like what percentage of that would you say is business? How much is it policy? What is required and stuff like that?
Sure. So one of the nice parts about the curriculum is there is a lot of flexibility. We do have a core, so all of our students do start with a core, which is about a third to a half of your classes, depending on what you place out of, because we do offer the opportunity for students to level up if they already have the right skill set. But that core curriculum includes classes like strategy, corporate finance, marketing, accounting, like you would see again in a more traditional MBA program. But it also includes classes in international law, in international economics, and also in regional studies, where you pick a special region that you're focusing on. That whole core, as I said, about third to half of your classes. From there, all of our students pick 2 focus areas, one in international business and one in international affairs. On the international business side, they have the choice between finance, strategy, marketing, and business for social impact. So students who are interested in things like impact investing and social entrepreneurship or PPPs, that's a great place for them. So you pick one of those focus areas, and then you pick a focus area in international affairs, and we have a choice of about, I believe about 20 different fields at this point that are on offer. So you could choose anything from international monetary theory to global political economy to international environmental policy. So it's really up to the students to pick 2 focus areas that make sense for them and to combine them in a way that's really going to meet the needs of their own professional goals and meet the needs of the marketplace that they're looking at. So there's a lot of flexibility there in terms of how students weigh and balance their electives.
I mean, that sounds lovely, especially the diversity in terms of both the business courses and otherwise. And it's great to have that opportunity for students who are enrolled at the schools. So these courses, and of course, they're like very different in nature. What would you comment about the teaching style of the professors? Are they like case-based courses? Are they more like project-based? Is there some more theory? Like, what would you say about the teaching style?
That's a great question, and it's really a combination. Obviously, a lot of our business classes are going to be case-based because that's kind of the standard. But because many of our classes are much smaller, you'll find that you also have classes that are really focused on conversation, and there'll be 15 people in a room with a professor guiding a conversation about that topic. Still others might be lecture-based, but really no classes here are much bigger than about 50 students. So even in those lecture-based classes, it's a relatively small and intimate experience. And I would say one of the nice parts for our students is they really have the opportunity to decide, do you want more quantitative classes where you're doing a lot of problem sets? Do you want more classes where you're writing policy memos? Do you want classes with exams, or do you want classes with research papers? Do you want practical skills-oriented classes, or do you want more theoretical classes? It's really up to you to balance those, and we do offer all of them.
Wow, okay. Listening to all these courses reminds me of a question that students ask us very often, and that is, how heavy is this course load going to be, and how does that impact their day? Like, the question that we get very frequently is, how does a day, being a student of the MIB program look like? Are they just in classes for 12 hours of the day, or like, are they doing something else? Or
So I think it's a really good question, and I think kind of the Fletcher style of education is quite different. Not that many hours a day are spent in classes, maybe 4 hours a day at the most. It really depends on kind of which day of the week it is. But Fletcher is a really close student body and a really kind of intimate gathering of people. So I would say most of our students come to campus and they stay for the day, even if they're only in classes for 2 to 3 hours for that particular day. They're doing their studying on campus. They have group meetings for classes. There's a huge amount of group work in our in the classes that we have. So they're meeting with their groups. They're doing research projects. They're meeting with faculty because our faculty are very accessible. And they're also taking advantage of the student groups that we have. They might be running our consulting club or our social impact club or our finance club, so doing work with that. And then on top of that, Fletcher as a school, we organize many, 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 many speakers and conferences. So I think on any given day, and the calendar is open access, so anybody that can see it would like to. There's no fewer than 3 to 4 speakers a day that would happen during the lunch hour. So you might want to go see an experienced finance professional. Today we have a talk that's being given by an alum who's been in the hedge fund world for over 30 years, and it's called Why Smart Women Love Money. So you could do that today if you wanted to. You might be able to see a diplomat or a five-star general who's here on campus. Also today speaking on campus is the author of House of Cards, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that Netflix series, but he wrote the original books on which that's based, and he's a Fletcher alum, and he's here speaking. So, you know, days are really chock full here, and it's not just sitting in class.
I'm sure students will appreciate that. Speaking of which, and this is a great lead into that question, who goes to MIB program? Like, who goes to Fletcher? If you could tell us a little about what is the profile of a student like? And I understand that it would be very diverse, but if I just speak to somebody walking in campus, what would I get to know about them?
Sure. So, you know, collectively, the class is indeed diverse, and I think it's probably important to note that. We've got about 35 students entering a year. It's usually about half US students, half international students. The average entering age is about 27 to 28, so most students are bringing 3 to 5 years of work experience to the table. But in terms of professional experience, they come from every walk of life. I mean, we certainly have people coming from more traditional business fields who've worked in multinationals or finance or consulting, but we also have a lot of people coming from the sciences. I'm sure, you know, you might have a few software engineers and that you might be interested in this, and we certainly have people who have that kind of background as well. We have medical doctors and journalists. And so I think for us, because it's such a unique program with so much flexibility, what we're really looking to understand is how, you know, if you're 28 years old and you have maybe 4 years of experience in finance, or you have 5 years of experience in product management in the software field, what does that mean for what you want to do next, and how can Fletcher help get you there? And we're really looking to understand that continuum. And I would say that's kind of more important than any particular GMAT score or exact age. It's really about your ability to talk about how your experience in the past, professional and academic, is preparing you for the next step.
Great. I think you're touching upon admissions, which is, I guess, the hot topic of the discussion. But we'll just wait for that for a few minutes and talk. And we want to know a little bit about the facilities in terms of so the career centers, what kind of support is available for students, especially international students, any like entrepreneurship centers and other facilities that you think MIB students are most probable to want and use?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I think it kind of goes back when you asked about the average day. Again, you know, there's so much at Fletcher. It's a really rich student community, so students are really able to take advantage of that. And it starts with, obviously, the accessibility of the professors. And I would say that's probably one of the most important kind of resources that our students have available to us, is the fact that they're all here in the Fletcher building. They have office hours. They're open to meet with students outside of class. So that's resource number one. The next step and kind of set of opportunities we have is, I would say, through our research centers. We have about 16, I think, research centers here on campus, which are faculty-led, but engage students in many different ways. And these research centers allow you to delve in deep into being research assistants or attending lectures or conferences. And I think the most notable one for the students on this call would be the Institute for Business in the Global Context, which is really a premier research center that does research on topical issues around international business. We focus on digital innovation and the digital economy. We focus on financial inclusion and kind of social impact. And we also focus on sovereign wealth funds and global capital flows. And so this is a great resource where students outside of the classroom are connecting with faculty and researchers, and in many cases doing rich field work that really allows them to take their learning beyond the classroom. You also mentioned the Office of Career Services, which is a tremendous resource here. We have an Office of Career Services specifically dedicated to Fletcher students, and they offer everything from professional training to arranging panels with alums who are focusing on different careers, to employers who come to campus, to job postings for employers who can't come to campus. And they also manage a few different treks or trips every year, going to Washington, D.C., to New York, to San Francisco, so students can really engage one-on-one with employers. But I think most notable about our Office of Career Services is that they're really there to meet with students one-on-one. They do coaching, they can help with cover letters, they help connect you with our amazing, amazing alumni network, and help you with salary negotiations when the time comes. So it's really a really great resource for our students.
Sounds lovely. And now I guess our viewers are very excited about MIB program at Fletcher, and now they are wondering, how do we get into this program? What's the application process like? So if you could take us through the application process with specific focus on international students, that would be great.
Sure, that's great. And, you know, I think I jumped the gun on that a little bit, but I think there's just a real relevance between who our students are and what we look for in the application process. We do, as I mentioned before, have about 50% international students and many applicants from India, so we're very accustomed to working with students who are from outside the US. Our application is a fairly standard application process, but it does differ from the traditional MBA application process in a few ways, and I'll note those first. First of all is that we don't really have a round system, so we don't have this early round where you get your decision and then you make your decision and that wraps up. It's a little bit more like the traditional undergrad or public policy school application process. So we have an early decision deadline where you would apply by November 15th, a January deadline or a March deadline, but they all have roughly the same response time, and they all are going to require that you respond later in the spring. So that's kind of worth noting, first of all. But in terms of the requirements themselves, we do have everything's online, so it's an online application that you fill out with all the basic demographics that you would expect to see. We require a resume, of course, or a CV. A brief tip to your viewers that I would say to really try and focus on an American-style resume and not a European one. So 1 page, maybe 2 pages if they have extensive work experience, but really to try and limit that. If you include everything in your resume, we won't know what to focus on. So you really want to be disciplined about focusing on the things that are most important to you in that resume. Next, of course, we've got a personal statement and an optional essay to go along with that. Those are really important ways in which we understand who you are and what you're looking for. We do require GMATs or GREs as well. For the GMATs, the middle 50% for admitted students is 650 to 720. For most Indians, we would not require the TOEFL or the IELTS. As long as your education, your undergraduate education was in English, you don't need to submit those. And
right.
My recommendation would be, even if you have them, don't, because it's unless your scores are really almost perfect on those, there's no need to share them. And then we have a financial aid application as well, which we'll, I'm assuming, get to in a moment. But I think for international students, again, we're very used to working with Indian applications. There's not really any kind of special explanations that you would really need to do in that way.
Just to continue in the same domain, there is this group of students usually who have applied to, say, Tufts the previous year, and this year they're using our services and applying again. But they are very committed to Fletcher. And is there any advice you would have for them that you want to give them when they're doing the reapplication?
Sure, maybe a few things. I would say first, trying to take advantage of some of the things that we do offer virtually for students. So first of all, we do offer virtual Skype interviews. Interviews are optional and they take place before you submit the application. So right now, literally this week is the time to be signing up for those. We do them through early December. They're done by students and the Skype interview slots fill in quickly. So honestly, there's no reason every single applicant should take advantage of those, and many don't. And so I think taking advantage of that interview really does show a level of commitment and helps us understand better who you are. So I would say that's tip number one. The second tip is to try and join one of our virtual information sessions or one of our chats. Again, these are great ways to get a little bit more information from us and also to demonstrate your interest as well. But I think probably one of the most important things is just to be specific in your essay. It's a really unique program, and I think if you're kind of throwing some generalist MBA speak at us, it's not going to show us that you understand what kind of program this is. And so I think to really demonstrate that you understand why this kind of niche program is right for you and your career interest is one of the most important things.
Thank you so much. I think that's something that's definitely going to be helpful. And just you reiterating the commitment and showing the interest is, I think, really vital for our students. I guess a big point of concern for a lot of international students is financial aid, like how will they be able to fund their education? And I'm sure you get questions around that a lot. So if you would want to shine some light in that, again, from the point of view of international students from India.
So it's an important question, and to be honest, I'm always happy when people ask about it, because really it's smart of students to start thinking about funding their education at the same time that you're thinking about applying for graduate schools. Because the truth is that for most graduate schools, you're going to be funding at least part of your education yourself, and so you need to start thinking about that. At Fletcher, we do offer scholarship aid, and we offer it to US and international students alike. And somewhat uniquely in the business world, we're offering those scholarships based on both merit and need. So on the merit side, again, it's really the sum total of your application parts, your work experience, and your academics, and your international experience. On the need side, we are asking for basically a rough financial statement and an idea of what kind of savings and debt you have and how you're looking to fund your education. And we're combining those two to offer a scholarship package. We do offer scholarships to about 90% of the students who apply for them. Now, the amount is the question. The amount ranges from several $1,000s a year all the way up to full tuition, which is about $50,000 US a year. The truth is, I'll be honest, while we do have a small number of full tuition scholarships, it's a very small number. And so most students are at least half funding their education, tuition expenses, as well as their living expenses. So thinking about that early is important. Now, so you've got that, hopefully some kind of Fletcher scholarship package that's helping to mitigate the costs. We do also offer a loan program for international students that does not require a US cosigner. The interest rate, I would say, isn't the lowest, but it's definitely lower than most Indian educational loans. So I think that it can be of help as well. But again, it's worth thinking about our scholarships, personal funds that you can contribute early on in the process. And I'd also encourage people to start looking at external scholarships as well, things like Fulbright or other scholarship programs, but to bear in mind that those have extremely early application deadlines, often well over a year before you enroll.
And just a small question about part-time jobs. Do you have a lot of international students taking part-time jobs at the university to support themselves? And if yes, would you know what kind of jobs they are? And is the application process fairly simple for that?
Yes, so the part-time jobs, there are many, many different options, and they change a little bit depending where you are in your trajectory at Fletcher. So during your first year, based on US visa regulations, nothing that we can control, students can work on campus, but only on campus. And there are quite a few different jobs on campus that range from everything from basic office work to working as a research assistant. And the application process is going to be pretty different, to be honest, depending on which office is hiring for those. But those certainly exist, and they can easily be a part of your first year of your education at Fletcher. I will say that the total amount that you could earn is going to maybe be up to about $5,000 for the year, so it's not going to make a drastic change in your financial situation, but certainly would help with living expenses. During the summer, between the first and second year, obviously most of our students do an internship. Those internships range everything from working in financial inclusion and microfinance, to investment banking, to consulting, to working for an NGO. So in terms of work experience, always very rich. In terms of income, it's going to depend a little bit on which field you choose.
Right.
So there's the summer internship there. And then in your final year of study, we do have a special work authorization visa program that does allow you to work off campus. So that really opens up some options for our students. Many actually continue on with their internships after the summer and during their second year.
Right, sounds great. And that obviously brings us to the full-time career opportunities. And so if you would have any statistics to add to that in terms of international students being able to access or like the placement, let's say, yeah.
Sure. So it's a great question, because I think that's the reason you're coming to graduate school, right? You're thinking about what comes next and the ROI. And so for Fletcher students, about 95% of our students have jobs within 6 months of graduation. So obviously they're landing great jobs after they graduate. For international students, it's very kind of evenly split between international students who return to their home country, international students who stay in the US, and international students who go to a third country, a completely new country altogether. So, and that holds true regardless of where you're coming from. So I'd say really the sky's the limit. I mean, if you're an Indian student, you may choose to stay in the US, you may go home, and you may go to Tanzania. It's really kind of an evenly split there. But about 70% of our students are going into the private sector. The remaining 30% are going into multilateral organizations like the UN or the World Bank or the IFC, or into nonprofits or public sector, so diplomacy and places like that. Within the private sector, the largest kind of tranches are in finance and consulting, but these, to be honest, are often kind of different, unique international jobs. We might have students going into more traditional finance jobs, but we also see a lot of students who are going into areas like frontier markets and frontier financing, or students who are doing infrastructure and public sector finance. The same holds true for consulting. We certainly see students going to the top consulting firms, but many, if not more, going into niche consulting around issues like political risk consulting, or going into kind of social impact consulting. So I think that's what's really unique about Fletcher, is we certainly can offer a traditional international business path, but we also, it's great for students have these really niche career interests, and we help find them. And I think that's what's special about our process. It's not just about a plug and play into a recruiting machine on campus. It's really about understanding what an individual student wants and helping them network and find the right opportunities for them.
Thank you so much for speaking about that, because I guess the number one concern for everybody, as you rightly said, is return on investment. Just to summarize with two questions that we've received from our audience. What's the gender ratio in the program like, and is there a particular undergraduate GPA that you're looking at, especially because I guess why people are asking is from India that might look very differently, and then how is that kind of translated?
Sure. I'm proud to say first that the gender split is about 50-50. So I think that's pretty unique amongst business programs, but every year evenly split. And some years it's been even a little more women, maybe like by barely a percentage point. So go women in the applicant pool, but go men too. Everybody, happy to have everybody. Then in terms of, sorry, your second question was, GPA. We look at GPA, of course, but really more importantly is we're looking at the trajectory and the types of classes that you're taking. So, I would say upwards of a 3.3 or 3.4 is kind of going to be the average of what we're looking at, but the middle 50% is going to be more like 3.4 to 3.7. To be honest, the fact that I can't quote a number to you should mean something. Really what we're looking at is, what was your undergraduate major? How did you do in those classes? Did you get better? If you had a rough start, did you get better over time? If you had some classes where you performed poorly, what were they, and why did that happen? And I would say, to your applicants, if you have a very strong GPA, there's obviously nothing to worry about. if you have a weaker GPA, you really want to think about how to mitigate that through the application. And there's a few ways you can do that. You can obviously do that through stronger test scores, but you can also do it by taking online or other postgraduate classes, especially if they're classes that you didn't have in undergrad that will really help boost your application. And I would say kind of a classic example is for an engineer. For example, might be a class that is either econ-based or more paper writing-based. I would say on the converse side, somebody from a more political background might want to make sure they have some quantitative coursework. And the final thing that I'll mention is that if you can get a meaningful academic letter of recommendation, that's always a nice touch to the application. We do require 2 letters of recommendation, but allow 3. And so if you're concerned about your academic profile, having that kind of softer assessment, not hard number about your academics is helpful.
Thank you so much for answering those questions, Kristen. I guess to end with, I would say, I mean, of course, you know that the whole application process is such a daunting task for all students. It takes forever to do it, taking tests and stuff like that. If you had to give one piece of wisdom and one advice, especially, you know, like from point of view of Fletcher as well, what would you say to the applicants?
One piece, that's hard. You know, I guess maybe a 2 or 3. The first is just to start early. I think if you start early, you have a long runway, and you know these things become a little bit less daunting over time. I mean, take your GMATs 2 years before you're going to apply. There's no reason not to. The scores are good for 5 years. The second, and this I do know that this is a little more time consuming, but focus more on the quality than the quantity. I mean, it's really about applying to the right schools for you, not applying to 15 schools. And I think, you know, it is really quite obvious to those of us who read applications when somebody's just kind of thrown their hat in the ring with no real thought to it. So taking time to really customize your essays for each school, even if that means applying to fewer schools, I think is really important.
All right, and why they should be applying to the MIB program, if I may ask?
Well, that's my favorite question, because you know, why you should be applying to the MIB program is if it is a good fit for you, and that's the first caveat. If it's a good fit for you, I can almost guarantee that there's probably no other school out there that can deliver in the same way that we can. I mean, this idea of contextual intelligence, the idea that while you're taking your corporate finance class, that you can take a class in climate change diplomacy at the same time that you're taking a class on nuclear non-proliferation or a class on fiscal and financial law. I mean, that's just an amazing opportunity. And the fact we offer 170 classes a year, and you take 8 a year. And that's not even to mention the fact that you can take classes at all of the Tufts graduate schools and all of the Harvard graduate schools. So really the sky's the limit in terms of being able to customize your experience here. So if you're looking for that kind of interwoven, interdisciplinary, international education, I mean, I think the MIB is the place to be.
Perfect. And with that, I'd like to thank Kristen for joining us today, I think morning in Boston, and just tell our viewers, thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you with your applications to hopefully MIB and other colleges as well. Again, as usual, for any help and requests for consulting, please reach out to help@reachivy.com. Thank you so much for joining.